Oral questions. The honourable member from South Surrey, White Rock.
Breaking news, Mr. Speaker. Rent spiked in October at the highest rate in 40 years. Rents up, taxes up, prices up, interest rates up. This Prime Minister's reckless spending is causing pain. Scotiabank says mortgage rates would be 2 full percentage points lower if the government would just control its spending. Canadians are at risk of losing their homes when they renew their mortgages. 2% is the difference between making it and breaking them. Will the Prime Minister end his reckless spending so that Canadians can keep their homes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The Honourable Member, Mr. Speaker, wishes to talk about Canadians keeping their homes. Let's look at the Conservative record on housing. When the now opposition leader was the so-called Minister of Housing, $300 million were allocated towards housing. How many homes were built? Less than 100, Mr. Speaker. Wow. The record speaks for itself. Across the country, we've signed deals with many municipalities: Kelowna, London, Hamilton, Halifax, Calgary. The list continues. We're going to continue to work with municipalities, with partners across the way, to make sure that we get homes built. This is an obligation, and we are up to the
The honourable member from Saskatoon Grasswood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. After 8 long years of this Liberal government, Canadians by the millions are depending today on food banks. Yet on Tuesday, this NDP Liberal government released its mini budget, adding another $20 billion in inflationary spending. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. When will this government cut the line of credit so Canadians can afford to eat, heat, and keep a roof over their heads?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, while our government has stayed steadfast in our commitment to support Canadians with affordability challenges, evidenced by Budget 2023 and now the Fall Economic Statement, we've seen the Conservatives this week flip-flop multiple times and showcase their risky and reckless behaviour and judgment. They say they're committed to supporting Ukraine, but then they abandon them in their time of need. We also have seen Conservatives stand up and oppose the Affordability Act, and yet last night they all stood up and voted for it. So why don't they come clean and let Canadians know where they stand?
Hear, hear.
The honourable member from Saskatoon Grasswood.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That member should know that Conservatives actually were the ones to successfully negotiate the current Canada-Ukraine trade agreement. And a common-sense Conservative government would modernize the existing agreement without this expensive Liberal carbon tax. Ukraine does not need this woke agenda. This Prime Minister has added more debt than the previous 22 Prime Ministers combined. When will he put the checkbook away?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we hear more and more that the leader of the Conservative Party is just not worth the risk. The bottom line is that the Conservatives might have supported the free trade agreement with Canada and Ukraine years ago, but just the other day, every one of them, with the leader of the Conservative Party leading the pack, voted against the Canada-Ukraine trade agreement. There is no way they can get out of that fact, Mr. Speaker. That is the reality. You have betrayed Ukraine, and it's shameful in terms of what you have conducted yourselves in the last couple of days.
I would like to remind all members, of course, that comments are brought through the chair.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 8 years, this Prime Minister has added billions of dollars to the debt, more than all 22 previous Prime Ministers. Just imagine, next year he will spend more money to service his debt than on the health transfers to the provinces. It's very clear that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Why are the Liberals refusing to present a plan for a balanced budget to lower interest rates and inflation, as we've been asking?
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader has called our plan disgusting, yet he's hiding his cuts from Canadians. What would the Conservative leader cut? Would he cut EV factories for Windsor, St. Thomas, and Quebec? Would he cut CCUS investment tax credits for projects in Alberta? Would he cut clean hydrogen investment tax credits for projects in Newfoundland? Mr. Speaker, our government is delivering an economic plan which is balanced and fiscally responsible. Conservatives should come clean with Canadians and let us know where they're going to cut.
L'honorable député de Belge.
The honourable member for Bellechasse, Les Iches-Lévis. Well, Liberals have been talking about their waste all day, but the numbers are clear. 2 million Canadians are going to food banks every month. A family of 4 will have to spend $1,065 more this year for groceries. Students are having to sleep in shelters. Mortgage payments have doubled, and all of this mess bears the mark of this Prime Minister, who is not worth the cost. Will he at least have the decency and humility to admit that it is because of his inflationary spending that our country is in a deplorable situation, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate my colleague's question, and I even have an idea for her. If she is so worried about affordability, Mr. Speaker, well, Christmas is coming up. Maybe she should give Canadians a present. She should vote in favor of Bill C-56. Why? Because in Bill C-56, we will reform our competition system, which is a reform we've needed for 30 years. We'll have less consolidation, more competition, better prices. She should convince all of her colleagues to move this bill forward to help Canadians for Christmas. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, these budget projections that only a contortionist could appreciate, that's a quote from Desjardins about this mini-budget. This Prime Minister has lost all fiscal credibility. Next year, we will be paying $51 billion to service the debt. That's double the amount we're using for national defense and as much as our health transfers. It shows that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Will the Liberals show some common sense, balance their budget, and help Canadians balance their own budget and be able to put food on the table? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, for those watching us at home this Friday, they know that these Conservatives are just not worth the risk. There is something that's going up here, and that's foreign investment in the country. But the Conservatives don't want to talk about that. Canada is now third in the entire world in attracting foreign investment after the US and Brazil. We have received record investment in the auto sector, the mining sector, in batteries, steel, aluminum. Mr. Speaker, we will continue fighting to make sure that Canada joins the economy of the 21st century. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, my colleague should fight more for Canadians. Does he want numbers? Well, we have the fastest inflation in 40 years. 2 million people, a record number, going to food bags in 1 month. Housing costs doubled. Mortgages have increased by 150%. Deposits to buy a house have doubled. Housing overall is 50 to 75% higher in Canada than the US. This government should be ashamed. All experts agree. Liberal spending has made costs go up. When will this government finally tell us when they will return to an accountable, balanced budget? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, what people want in this country, what they need is leadership, and that's what we showed in our mini-budget. Canadians told us two specific things. Help us with affordability and help us with housing. And that's exactly what we're doing with a mini-budget, Mr. Speaker. And what's more, we have announced the biggest reform in 30 years of the Competition Act. Because in this country, we want less consolidation, more competition, better prices for Canadians. We will continue fighting for Canadians every day.